But the thing that happened in Kabul International Airport is the clear evidence that there's still a terrorism in place. Because those terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIS and others might even get stronger in this situation. And from your standpoint, whether it is a crucial time to unify efforts, not only Pakistan but international community, to consider these threats because there might be some harmful consequences.
There is no doubt that if there is instability, chaos, a weak government in Afghanistan which cannot control the terrorists, because a weak government will not be able to control the space for terrorists in Afghanistan. So if that happens, then the country that is going to be most at risk will be Pakistan. As I said, there are 3 different terrorist groups that have been attacking Pakistan. One is the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, because they got, when Pakistan took action against these Pakistani Taliban who are attacking the state of Pakistan, they were pushed into Afghanistan. So one is that group. Second is ISIS. ISIS has done a number of attacks inside Pakistan territory. And so if, and that ISIS is the one which did that attack on the Kabul airport. But also we have Baloch terrorists. These terrorists have been using Afghan soil to do attacks in Balochistan. And therefore, yes, it is of, that's why Pakistan is talking to all the neighbors of Afghanistan. We want a consensus built how we can support this current government and stabilize the situation, how we should avert this humanitarian crisis. But I think the US has a big part to play, because US was there for 20 years. And it also bears responsibility. If there's chaos in Afghanistan, if there's terrorism from the soil of Afghanistan, then we must remember that 20 years ago, the only reason the US invaded Afghanistan was because of terrorism. Al-Qaeda, which had hit the US. So if that was the reason for coming over, then 20 years later, over $2 trillion spent, 2,400 Americans dead, but hundreds of thousands of Afghans dead, 80,000 Pakistanis died in this. So what would be the achievement if, after all this time, again Afghan soil is being used for terrorism? So therefore, I think the whole world community has to take cognizance. And this is a historic moment where they should not let Afghanistan drift towards chaos and go into another crisis.
Of course, we all know that Pakistan has suffered more than anybody else, any other countries, because of the situation in Afghanistan that lasts for many years, because Pakistan has the longest border with this country. And recently it was mentioned by your country that Pakistan is unable to receive more refugees from this country because the flood is too much. And if this trend will keep going, keep increasing, what do you think whether it's time for international community to think about some necessary measures to be taken in order to somehow facilitate this process?
Well, you know, firstly, I was listening to the Senate hearing where Secretary Blinken was there and answering these questions to the senators. And I must say, as a Pakistani, I felt deeply hurt by some of the remarks made by those senators. To blame Pakistan for this debacle in Afghanistan is the most painful thing for us to listen to. Pakistan is the country that gave the greatest number of sacrifices for the American war in Afghanistan. Pakistan was asked to join this invasion of Afghanistan by the Americans, or become part of this coalition, when Pakistan had nothing to do with 9/11. There was no Pakistani involved in it. Al-Qaeda was in Afghanistan. There were no militant Taliban in Pakistan. We had no reason to enter the war. But unfortunately, our military dictator at the time, to get acceptability from the Americans, he took us into this war. And this war cost Pakistan 80,000 people died in this. Because what happened was that the Mujahideen of 80s who were trained to fight jihad against the Soviets, we had trained them to fight against foreign occupation was a holy war, a jihad. And now when the Americans invaded Afghanistan, the same people we are trying to tell them now, because we had joined the Americans, we now are telling them that now fighting against the Americans is terrorism. So they turned against us. They called us collaborators. So they started doing terrorist acts against Pakistan. And then all along the border, the Pashtun tribes, which had sympathy with the Taliban, not because of their ideology, but because of their ethnicity. So the Pashtun nationalism kicked in. They too thought we were collaborators against fellow Pashtuns. And they formed what was the Pakistani Taliban. So they started attacking Pakistan as collaborators. And there were insider attacks from within the Pakistan army who had trained the Mujahideen. So there were 2 suicide attacks, failed attacks, but on General Musharraf. 50 different militant groups split into groups who were attacking the state of Pakistan at one point. On top of it, our ally, it's only time in history when a country is being attacked bombed by its own ally. 480 drone attacks were conducted in Pakistan by the US. So this country, what we went through, the suffering we went through, forget about the people who lost their limbs in bomb attacks, the loss to the economy, when you have suicide attacks, Islamabad was like a fortress. So the country lost over $150 billion. And after all this sacrifice, rather than a word of appreciation, because they appreciate other people, they're saying, we are worried about the Afghans who helped the coalition and who, they are trying to look after getting them to the US. But what about Pakistan? A country loses 80,000 people. Were we children of a lesser God? Didn't it matter to them? And then being made scapegoats for their failure in Afghanistan, I think was the most painful thing.
Sir, I would like to ask you with regard to the Pakistani position in terms of Taliban. Do you think it is needed to talk to them and also to recognize this new government?
I think the world, the international community, they do not have a choice. Because if they do not, Taliban is a reality now, they have taken over Afghanistan.